I'm the Meaningless Namie, and this is my review of Weathering with You. Weathering with You is the new film by Makoto Shinkai. His last film before this one was Your Name. Now, Your Name was one of my favorite movies of all time. I give it a completely serious, 11 out of 10 rating. Everything works together in that movie to create something beautiful. So, compared to that, Weathering with You was doomed to be only okay regardless of its qualities, just in comparison. But how is it actually, anyway? I'll try not to spoil anything that couldn't be seen in the trailers for the movie, but I am going to express some strong opinions about the general themes and plot of the movie, so if you don't want at least some of my bias, I'd recommend just seeing the film for yourself, because any review of it's going to give you a somewhat biased perspective of what to expect. And also, as a fan of all of Shinkai's movies overall, I'm going to be discussing open spoilers about some of his other filmography as a point of comparison to this movie. Now, if you just want basically my numerical part of this review, skip to this timestamp on the screen here. So, what did I think about Weathering with You? Beautiful weather is one of Shinkai's strong suits. So having a plot reason to show lots of rain and then lots of dramatically clearing skies was just right up his alley artistically. I don't know of anyone better to visually capture that aspect of the story. There's not as many scenes of nature, but there's still a lot of very beautifully rendered cityscapes and locations. Now, this might sound strange, but I think that's actually one of the core problems of the movie. Shinkai makes everything look too pretty. There are some locations in this movie that are not supposed to look inviting, and there's weather that is supposed to look threatening.
A special heavy rain advisory has just been issued in the Tokyo area.
But it rarely looks anything other than pretty. The scenes that are supposed to be beautiful and positive are when the sun comes out, and for these, the beauty of these scenes works very well. But the flooding and other serious weather in this movie is very hard to take seriously when the water is all beautiful and crystal clear. Real flooding is dirty and full of debris. A flood in a major metropolitan area such as Tokyo would not look like this beautiful Shinkai weather, and it makes all of the weather not feel threatening even when it's supposed to. The second main problem, and the one I feared the most from the trailers, is the constant conflict with authorities.
What do you know about the boy in the video?
Stop!
What do I do? They're going to separate us!
Everyone being after the main characters is boring and cheap drama that serves only to move the plot along. There is no agency for the protagonists when they have to run away because they know something the authorities don't, and they have to go, do something, so there's no chance to talk things out. You see this in all kinds of movies, both with teenage protagonists and with full-grown adults. I don't like these kind of stories in general, and in this particular movie, there's many other conflicts that could have brought the plot to a head that would have told us a lot more about the characters and made me care more about them. There's chases and fights in this movie, but rarely is there any particular character decision leading into them. As an aside, the best conflict with authorities in an anime movie I've seen is from a scene in Kiki's delivery service that didn't happen. When she first arrives in the city, Kiki has a run-in with a police officer, and a different movie would have had him reappear and chase her down repeatedly throughout the film. That would have sucked, and I'm really glad the movie didn't do that. Weathering with You has two main themes, in my opinion. The weather, and characters having to deal with making choices for themselves and the consequences of those choices.
Time to grow up, little man.
Both of these are handled very effectively at some points in the film, but throughout the whole film, there's some very different, inconsistent pictures of these themes. I think for both of these themes, my issues with them come down to balancing between the fun and the serious parts of those themes. To focus on one example of that balance, I have a question I don't actually have an answer to. Does Shinkai really like firearms? This is the third of his films to have realistic weaponry in it, the others being The Place Promised in Our Early Days and Children Who Chase Lost Voices. And when I saw the handgun in the Weathering With You trailer, my reaction was, what? Why? The other two movies have serious military operations going down. This one does not. Weathering With You has a lot of serious scenes, especially ones where the handgun makes an appearance, but they don't feel in tune with the rest of the movie. Rather than having close ties to the characters or Hina's sunshine powers, the dark scenes are like the handgun. They show up in the story, but they don't really have a satisfactory explanation for being there, and I think the story would have been better if they weren't. You could remove the gun or any of the side characters or antagonizing figures, and it wouldn't change the central narrative about a teenage love story and a girl who can make the sun break through the clouds at all. In all of Shinkai's films, the movie's relationships between the main characters and the serious plot in this movie are the worst by far, and that ruined a lot of the investment I would have had in serious scenes. So, from that description, this may seem like it's an aimless mess of a movie with just plot and no fun, so here's some positives for the second half of this review. This movie is not a terrible movie, and hiding somewhere under all my issues with it is actually a lot of good scenes and good characterizations. First large positive. The music is good. I knew the music was good before even seeing the movie, because I already heard some of the soundtrack. Since seeing Your Name, I've become a fan of Radwimps, the band that produced Your Name's soundtrack, as well as most of this movie's soundtrack, and I heard several of the tracks from this movie before I knew they were even from the movie. A couple other artists also had good vocal tracks in this movie as well. Unfortunately, and this is a very small nitpick here that most people probably won't care about, the songs in the English dub of this movie were not dubbed in English, unlike with Your Name. This is probably because while Radwimp's singer is perfectly fluent in English, the other singers on the project may not have been or may not have wanted to record English versions of their songs. So the only dubbed song is the end credits song. This doesn't matter at all to my appreciation of the film, but I really liked the dubs of the songs in Your Name. But anyway, speaking of the music, some of the best scenes in the movie were the montage upbeat scenes with that the songs were playing over. Just like in Your Name, these scenes were well-paced and fun, and the characters got to interact in likable ways. These were definitely the scenes that felt the most like scenes from Your Name, but in this case, I don't think that's a negative comparison at all, because these scenes were also very well done. And of course, through all the scenes, the movie is absolutely beautiful. Really, the whole movie is as beautiful as you'd expect anything from Shinkai to be, and I think for a lot of people that would probably make it worth seeing in theaters just for the visuals alone. Shinkai absolutely designs his scenes for the big screen, and a lot of areas of the movie are just packed with tiny details you probably wouldn't even see on a TV screen, and certainly wouldn't be able to appreciate. So, in the end, did I like this movie? Yeah, I enjoyed this movie. But did I love it? No, absolutely not. And I think my review probably will come off to a lot of people way more negative than my actual opinion of the movie is. It's not a terrible movie, and it has some very strong points. But my issues with the movie are at the front of my mind, and it is nowhere as good as Your Name. For a score, I'd give this a 6.5 out of 10. Maybe closer to a 7. This is probably Shinkai's second best movie overall, but I would personally argue that Children Who Chase Lost Voices is still his second best. I know that's an unpopular opinion, and defending that movie is an argument for another day. But wait, I still have a few extra metatextual thoughts about this movie to talk about, so there's still some review left. While I did talk about Your Name before because it is relevant as the movie that got me to watch Shinkai films at all, I'm now going to talk about this movie as it relates to Shinkai's entire catalog, and I think some of the thoughts I have about that are probably more interesting than the actual movie itself. So I saw this movie in an early viewing screening that had an interview with Makoto Shinkai about the film after the end credits, and he had a couple of very interesting things to say, and clarified a couple things about the film and his ideas for the film. First thing he said was that the abnormal rainfall was supposed to just be about climate change, and how it will affect our everyday lives. The more interesting take he had to say was about Your Name's success. Your Name broke a mold of what types of anime movies would be super successful, but while he appreciated that success, he's also very keenly aware that he can't just keep making Your Name over and over again. A lot of Shinkai's movies have been about destroying something that's revered, and I think Weathering with You is kind of that as well. So, in The Place Promised in Our Early Days, the titular tower is this mysterious beacon that gains a reverence from the characters, but at the end of the movie it's destroyed. Shinkai has made various remarks in the past criticizing Studio Ghibli's style, which is appropriate to talking about his body of work because Children Who Chased Lost Voices is also about destroying something revered, but in this case being a lot of the ideas of Studio Ghibli films. That movie has fantasy creatures being gunned down by modern weaponry and a narrative that's ultimately just mired in a long history of violence and death, and is in many ways a repudiation of a lot of things associated with Ghibli. And now we have Weathering with You, which, in line with Shinkai's comment on not being able to just remake Your Name forever, seems to try to directly contrast Your Name at many points. The weather in nature is not given such reverence, obviously, but the movie also tries, sometimes a lot more successfully than others, to show a different depiction of Tokyo and the type of story it's trying to tell as well. There are no glamour shots of Tokyo. There's lots of beautiful shots, but they are not highlighting the city as a glamorous place. There are no glamorous touristy shots of the city. Instead, the main characters are runaways, hack writers, and other people sort of on the margins of society. This reading doesn't make the movie by itself any better or worse, but I think this is interesting to think about in reading into some of Shinkai's catalog. I have one last thing to say, and I'll put a spoiler warning here, but it's something that does not affect the plot or characters of the movie at all, but is still, nonetheless, something surprising that people may not expect to see in Weathering with You. If you don't want to be spoiled for the movie at all, thanks for watching, just stop the video right now. Some of the cast of Your Name make cameos in Weathering with You. Seeing them again is the best part of the movie, however, they're not actually very well done cameos. The teacher in Mitsuha's school in Your Name was a main character of Garden of Words. She does not get excessive screen time or emphasis. It's a true cameo. In Weathering with You, the camera loves Taki and Mitsuha when you see them, and knows the audience wants to see them too. And I did love seeing them, but from a purely storytelling perspective, they did not deserve any extra emphasis in the scenes they were in. I think this is also a sort of weird decision for a movie that's trying to be different from Your Name in a lot of critical ways, to also have scenes like this that are clearly just pandering to, wow, remember how great Your Name was? Don't you like these characters? Yes, we do, but it's kind of weird. Anyway, that's all. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And of course, if you have a different opinion about this movie and think that I'm a heathen whose opinion's invalid because I even care about dubs, certainly tell me in the comments. Roast me. Did I miss an essential message of the movie? Roast me. And, of course, regardless, have a nice day, hopefully without an entire summer of torrential rains that never stop.